What makes Mopars awesome? So a couple of weeks ago we did that video, Why Mopars Suck, about the casting issues that came with them. But now we have to do the flip side. What makes Mopars awesome? So I have to go back. When I was a kid, it was like, 10, 11, 12. One of my neighbors, I got a neighbor named George, and he ran a one-car shop out of his house. So while the other kids were like playing sports ball and doing all that stuff, I was over in George's garage scraping gaskets, and we did a lot of front-end work, tons of front-end work, because New York City, Staten Island, it was one continuous pothole. So it tore the hell out of front ends. And George was a GM guy. And, even at that age, I was totally in love with Mopars. Only we didn't call them Mopars then, we called them Chryslers, because Mopar didn't really come around until like the 80s when people really started using it in common terminology. So George hated Chrysler products. So we had another neighbor, and she had a 70 Satellite station wagon, green, wood grain, big block, 383, loaded, right? Every option under the sun. She was a solid 400-pounder, and her old man was another solid 400-pounder. So the front end of this thing, after 5 or 6 years of bouncing around New York, city streets, was just on the ground. So she walks over to George's one day and she says, "Can you fix the front end of my car? I can't drive it anymore. The wheels are like this, and it's just you hit a bump in it." So George looked at it and says, Chrysler's junk. It's got that torsion bar in there. You got to rebuild the whole front end. And I'm like, Now at the time, right, I was eat up with Chrysler products. I read everything I could read. I studied. I memorized it, did everything. And I was like, I can fix that. I can adjust the torsion bars, because I know you can adjust the torsion bars. So I grabbed the manual, right, and Chilton's, right? And I found the procedure on how to do it and everything. And so I says, hey, I can fix that. It's not going to cost anything. It'll take 2 minutes. So she was like, go ahead and try it. So I grabbed a 3/4 inch, socket and a ratchet. I climbed underneath the front of the car, and the front of the car was like down in the weeds. And I start cranking on the torsion bars. Cranking. And nothing's happening. And I'm starting to be like, oh, jeez, right? Cranking. I go as far, and this was like, I go all the way up. I get the bolts, whatever, just about all the way buried, and the car's only come up maybe a half an inch. Oh, jeez, right? George was right. It's junk. What are you going to do? So a while later, she gets in the car, she turns the key, starts it up, starts to pull out of the parking space. So then she's pulling out of the parking space, the front end is coming up and up and up and up. And like, by the time she got halfway down the street, it looked like a gasser. Because I didn't know about how to settle the things out, But that's when I realized, there's the magic of Mopar. It's like, you can adjust the height of the front end of this thing with just turning that bolt. I proved George wrong, right? But there's like more to it than that, okay? When Chrysler engineers designed the Valiant, because now all of these cars that we deal with from the classic era, the Mopar classic era, 1960 to 1980s, like that, all of them evolved from the 1960 Plymouth Valiant. For 1962, they just expanded everything in a couple of inches in every dimension, and that's where the B-body came from. And then the E-body came from that, right? So all of those cars descend from the 1960 Valiant. And two of the features of the 1960 Valiant was the torsion bar front suspension, which Chrysler had gone to in their regular cars in 1957, the torsion air suspension, and the asymmetrical leaf spring. So what they ended up with is the perfect, I know that Chrysler engineers didn't have drag racing in mind when they designed the Valiant, but as it turns out, they created the perfect device for it. So let's start at the back, and then we'll go back to the torsion bar, because that's really the main feature. At the back of a Chrysler product, you have the asymmetrical leaf spring. What that means is that the axle is not centered in the leaf spring. The axle's in the first, you got a third of the spring here and then 2/3 back here. And what that does is it turns the front of the front spring segment into a traction bar. Ford and General Motors leaf spring cars have the axle centered in the spring, but Chrysler moved it to the front. And that's why Ford and Chrysler cars need that, a slapper bar or traction bars. They need something to keep the front end from wrapping up, or the spring from going S-shaped when you're on it. Chrysler products, no. It's born with a traction bar. So that's the one good part of it. The other good part of it is the torsion bar. See, now the torsion bar, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with it, right? The torsion bar is simply a spring, but instead of being coiled, like a regular coil spring, it's left straight and it's twisted. And that twist is what holds the front of the car up. One of the main differences, just driving regular cars, one of the main differences is the torsion bar barely needs a shock absorber to be stable. Like, for instance, if you took the shock absorber completely out of a Ford or a General Motors, a coil spring car, and you drove it down, let's say, a bumpy road, the car would be going like this. It's like undrivable, right? On a Chrysler product, you could take the shocks out of the car, and it'll never do this. It'll do this, it'll do this, but it won't just go like that. So the torsion bar actually creates a very stable ride in the front of the car. But from a hot rodding standpoint, one of the beauties is that you can adjust and jack weight using the torsion bars. So let's say you want to drop the front of the car 2 inches. Let's come down here. All you would do is get on these bolts right here. This is the torsion bar adjusting bolt. This is an anchor for the bolt, and then at the top of this is a little finger, and then the torsion bar, which here, can you see the torsion bar here? The torsion bar is held in place with like a hex socket. By loosening or tightening this bolt right here, what you're doing is you're twisting the bar in that hex, and that gives you your ride height. So if you wanted to, let's say, lower the car 2 inches, all you would do is just loosen this. The car would come down. Your lower limit is really the bump stop, this piece right here, where it contacts the frame. That's as low as you can go. You can go as high as you want. You can max this thing out. It'll look like a gasser going down the road. You probably get about 7 or 8 inches of total upward height. Instantly and infinitely adjustable. Now, let's say you're dealing with a drag car, okay? One of the key features of this, and something that so many guys just completely neglect, one of the key features of this is that you can jack weight across the car. At the hit, when the car starts to accelerate, 2 things happen. The left front of the car tries to rise, and that's a reaction to engine torque pulling it that way. But the right rear corner of the car tries to rotate this way, and it's the counter-rotational force to the engine on the rear axle. So basically, the body of the car is trying to come down here, but the axle is trying to go up in here. What happens is this side gets light, and this is the side that breaks traction first. With the torsion bar front suspension, you can jack weight this in this direction. So you can tighten the driver's side more than the passenger side, get it up a little bit, and then that'll help counteract the forces trying to lift this tire off the ground. It's infinitely adjustable, and it's once you start getting used to like playing with the torsion bar settings, you can adjust for all different track surfaces, street surfaces, all different weather conditions, different tire types, like you name it. It's an infinitely adjustable thing. It's a kind of suspension. Chrysler products are born with the kind of suspension that General Motors and Ford guys spend thousands of dollars trying to replicate, or at least attain those good qualities. And unfortunately, a lot of Chrysler guys don't take advantage of it. They don't understand what's there, so right away they'll go to a coil-over front suspension. They start putting these tubular K-frames and all sorts of things in there. And yeah, you're saving yourself 15 or 20 pounds over the whole, assembly that Chrysler put there, but you lose that simple, easy adjustability. These things are like foolproof. So torsion bars have a bad rap for 2 reasons. First, like George, most mechanics are used to dealing with coil spring front suspensions. So to deal with anything having to do with the Chrysler, which is unorthodox, it's out of their wheelhouse. Usually the most common thing to go bad with these over time is the lower control arm bushing. The lower control arm bushing is really what attaches the torsion bar to the lower control arm. It's up in here. It's the pivot point. And when that goes bad, the lower control arm will start to move around a bit. The other thing that goes with that gave torsion bars a bad name or bad rap is that they will break. In fact, the earliest ones, 1957, 1958, 1960, there was an epidemic of broken torsion bars. Like there was like month-long waiting list for torsion bar replacements in the very first run of these things. And then they got the right metallurgy and the right heat treat, and that problem went away. Occasionally, you'll get one that'll snap, but it's rare, very rare. The other thing is people are afraid to pull torsion bars in and out because they'll break. If you nick them, that nick becomes a stress riser, and it'll snap at the stress riser point. So I see guys create all kinds of crazy tools to get torsion bars in and out, without doing any damage to them. But I'll show you a trick. You don't need any tools at all, and there's zero chance of damaging the torsion bar. Come back under here. All you do is take this nut off right here. You take this nut off. Okay, at the back of the torsion bar, where it goes into the cross. Remember here? There's a little C-clip, like a wire C-clip. You take that out. Okay, I could probably take it out by finger, but I'm not going to bother with that right now. You take that C-clip out. You come back here. You take this nut off, and then you take a pinch bar, a big screwdriver, whatever you've got your hands on. You unload the torsion bar, loosen this bolt all the way, and then take a big screwdriver and put it right between the lower control arm and the K-frame and just give it a pry back. If you pull this back about 4 inches, the torsion bar just falls out the back. And then when you're replacing the torsion bar, you don't have to worry about nicking it or damaging it. You just put the torsion bar back in through the cross member here, and then you could tap it in with a hammer. You don't have to worry about nicking the ends of it or doing any damage to the ends of it. That's not where a stress riser will happen to cause the break. So, really simple. No special tools involved. Now, on top of that, once you're accustomed to working with the torsion bars, you can swap a set in and out of a car in like 20 minutes. Use all different diameter torsion bars. There's small increments, like 10,000ths of an inch difference, 20,000ths of an inch difference. But like for instance, on a drag car, you would use like a 6-cylinder torsion bar. You use the thinnest torsion bar you can find for the application, because the 6-cylinder torsion bar has to be twisted more to maintain the height. So when you leave the starting line, that twist wants to thrust the front of the car up into the air and transfer the weight. That will get you off the starting line. If you're into handling, that sort of thing, you use an extremely thick torsion bar, and that'll make the car ride flat with very little up and down reaction. The Chrysler torsion bar suspension is just this feat of automotive engineering. It's like one of the most understated, underrated, the systems in the world of cars. So that's it. Oh, by the way, they continued that up until the F bodies, the FMG bodies, went with a transverse torsion bar setup. So instead of the torsion bars running this way on the car, they run actually to the front and then crisscross each other, which is another system. It's the same. It's just a different twist on the same thing. So that's it. That's the kind of stuff that makes Mopars awesome. Every manufacturer had great engines, beautiful bodies, crazy colors, over-the-top options, but only Chrysler had the torsion bar front suspension and those asymmetrical leaf springs. See you tomorrow.